So we are going to get started. Our presentation will start with a presentation. First, we're going to have an introduction by Steve Hiss, then a presentation, and then there'll be time for Q&A. So we want to thank everyone for being here today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve to introduce our esteemed guest, who we're really appreciative. We're very appreciative that he's here sharing his time with us. So Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Jill. I'm very pleased to introduce Aneesh Chopra, who's a longtime friend of the Batten School and a member of our own advisory board. Aneesh is the president of Care Journey, an open data source that helps providers, payers, and pharma market leaders make smarter decisions in the move to value. He also co-founded its parent company, Hunch Analytics, a hatchery incubating ideas that improve the productivity of health and education markets. From 2009 to 2012, Aneesh served as the first U.S. Chief Technology Officer, and from 2006 to 2009, he served as the fourth Virginia Secretary of Technology. His public service focused on better public-private collaboration, as described in his 2014 book, Innovative State: How New Technologies Can Transform Government. In 2017, Aneesh joined the board of the Healthcare Cost Institute, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization focused on complete, accurate, unbiased healthcare utilization and cost information. In 2015, he served as the inaugural Walter Sorenstein Media and Democracy Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School. In 2011, Modern Healthcare named him to its list of the 100 most influential people in healthcare. And in 2008, Government Technology magazine named him as one of its top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers. Aneesh earned his Master of Public Policy from Harvard Kennedy School in 1997 and his Bachelor of Arts degree in Health Policy from the Johns Hopkins University in 1994. Please join me in welcoming Aneesh Chopra to this week's Batten Hour.
That was actually very kind for that, a very fancy introduction. I didn't realize all that, but thank you for that. And look, we are amongst friends on this line. We're going to have a conversation. I did prepare some background material, maybe just to get the discussion flowing, but mostly I wanted to be as helpful as I can as you think about your role in this making government work and making sort of the public and the private sectors work better together kind of mandate. In my personal opinion, you're going to hear this throughout, while we have when it comes to problem solving, there's a very safe and healthy place where we can collaborate to make what we can do well together work better. And in my opinion, from a return on societal investment perspective, really focusing on excellence in making government work and actually solving problems through public-private collaboration is probably our greatest strength. And it does take leaders who see these dots connecting, putting the points on the board to bring the right folks. Again, you'll often find quiet consensus, but the movement to solve problems in this clever and creative way is definitely gaining steam. And so if you'll indulge me, maybe as a way to get this thing started, I'll kind of reference a few background materials to set the stage. Virginia, and I want to thank UVA writ large. I think it was the Weldon Cooper Center in particular, but when I was in the Kane administration, we launched a performance dashboard, if you will, it was called Virginia Performs was the brand. And the idea was, can we reach consensus between the public sector and the private sector on the several dozen key indicators to measure progress as a Commonwealth? Not government indicator, not private sector indicator, but societal Commonwealth indicators. And you can see we've clustered those indicators on the scorecard at a glance. This public-private partnership, by the way, was the father of this effort was our own Dubby Wynn, who's not only a friend, but I would consider family to the Batten program and frankly to UVA overall. Dubby chaired the Council on Virginia's Future during the creation of this scorecard. I played the role of technology, data, and innovation, partner to bring some of the, new capabilities to life in moving the needle on these indicators, but it was powerful that the legislature agreed to work in this sort of public-private partnership way. That was my philosophy coming into government, which is like, this is how we solve problems. We work together. The governing magazine, which had been the gold standard in measuring, high-performing states, they were famous for publishing every few years this thing called Best Managed State, or grading the states, I think was what they called it. And it was tough because Governor Warner was an awardee of the Best Managed State. Virginia had been the best. So I was in the Kane administration. Of course, I'm a disciple of Senator Warner. I'm blessed to have these two incredible senators as mentors. And that's no pressure, right? You got to stay number one. You can't fall. Who wants to be the governor that falls? That sucks. So Governor Kane, put a lot of effort on making sure that we were building on the progress that was put in place during the Warner years. And we did win Best Managed State. And it was specifically this Virginia Performs website, which was cited as a key reason why Virginia is one of the leaders in the country. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, it does allow you to take the temperature down in debates that otherwise feel heated. So it turns out that a child who fails the third grade reading SOL has a much higher probability of dropping out or having a lifetime of underemployment or economic challenges. It seems sort of personally tragic that a third grade test is the best predictor of your future economic capability. And yet here we are. So one of the interesting questions, we can have an ideological debate. Should we be doing testing? Should we not? Are they fair? Are they not? Fundamentally, we now can drill into each and every school within every school district exactly who's moving the needle on the third grade reading performance and break it down by race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and so forth. I still think to this day, we haven't done enough to bring that data to the discussion when we have local debates about these issues. But the Virginia Performs framework does give you a potential window in what life could be like when we take down the temperature and bring forward the information to understand what's working and what's not. If there's a best practice in one part of Virginia that closed the gap, how can we replicate their learning across the board? This same philosophy is what we took when I served as US CTO under President Obama. And it was built on the foundation for President Obama that these kinds of scorecards, while helpful, need bottom-up change as much as they need top-down leadership. So we put a lot more emphasis on building an infrastructure for a more entrepreneurial problem-solving community. And that infrastructure was largely powered by this philosophy. We call it Joy's Law. Joy's Law, the co-founder of Sun Microsystems, notes that no matter who you are, the smartest people on the problems that you care about work for someone else. That would be true of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, you name it. There's this wide breadth of talent in our society. And finding ways to tap that talent is going to be a critical piece to solving problems. Two quick attributes of this that I thought all of you might think about as tools in the toolkit as you graduate and move on to whatever chapter of life you have next. Number one, the concept of open innovation. The idea here was, and you can see President Obama's talking to Bruce Brown. He was the chief technology officer of Procter & Gamble. Very quickly in the 90s, the president of Procter & Gamble made a bold statement that 50% of all new products and services that Procter & Gamble would launch would be born on ideas sourced outside of their famous lab network. And Bruce, as CTO, was presumably the one that got punched in the gut because the boss is basically saying, you're not delivering the goods. We're going to have to look elsewhere for people to give us ideas. And I said, Bruce, what was your reaction when the boss made this statement? And he said, it was liberating. And he said, we knew that there were ideas all over the country, all over the world. And culturally, we were not organized to bring those ideas in and to foster them. So it took the CEO making a statement like this to do what we wanted to do naturally. And he just shared the story, and you can see the screenshot on how Procter & Gamble had a problem with diaper production. They were trying to build, 500 diapers a minute, and they wanted to ensure that the water absorbing features of the diaper could be delivered at high quality at that production rate. And there were just way too many errors in the production process. And so they were worried they were going to have to ship the jobs overseas to take lower the cost of production, assuming an error rate. Well, at the same time, the Los Alamos National Lab basically said, we're using this software to solve a similar problem. We don't want nuclear material on the manufacturing floor when it comes to nuclear energy, weapons, you name it. So we built these really advanced simulation tools. And so what Bruce was able to do with open innovation is take the simulation tools from Los Alamos, repurpose them for diaper production, and it delivered incredible results, over $1 billion of cash flow benefit to shareholders of Procter & Gamble, keeping jobs in Pennsylvania that would have gone overseas. So open innovation is, how do you collaborate more? And then on the right, you see a presentation with Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook. And this was this idea of platforms where, especially in government, too often when it comes to things like how do we enroll more people in health insurance, you've got government-funded workers trying to knock on people's doors to get them to shop. The theory here was, could we actually tap into the expertise of others? What Sheryl said famously at this event was, Facebook's a platform. She had asked her team, at the time Facebook had 3,000 employees, and she said, how many people have the job title Facebook developer? And, we were, sort of asking, people, what would your guess be? Oh, Facebook's an engineering heavy company. Maybe it's 1,000, maybe it's 500, who knows? When the HR department came back, they said, actually, the answer is 28,000. And sort of you scratch your head and like, wait a minute, only 3,000 people on payroll. Well, it turns out Facebook opened up its developer platform. So if Nike wanted to build a Facebook application, they could employ Facebook developers on Nike payroll and build that application on top of the platform. And it made me think about all the ways we could build a robust tech-enabled marketplace to really connect folks to benefits, to make sure that we're giving people public health, personalized public health instructions, and all the rest. So these two pillars of open innovation and open platforms, they became the bedrock of what I think policymakers in the future should tap when asked to solve a big problem. Now, a couple of case studies. I'm going to go a few minutes into the healthcare space just to kind of run deep. It's my life today as an example. But let me briefly describe it under the Biden administration's leadership. The president believes in building back better. That's the campaign philosophy that's now carrying into the administration. How are we going to build back better this incredibly broken public health data system? Did you know that when the CDC published the very first report on the 4,000 COVID positive cases in March of last year, 90% of those cases lacked any clinical context. So the CDC couldn't really tell us what chronic conditions, if you have them, are going to increase the likelihood that you're going to die from COVID. What an important thing for us to know last year. Who's going to die from COVID? And how do we make sure that that group of people stays home? It doesn't matter if you're a red state or a blue state. We can all agree high risk for COVID death should go. And so it's frustrating that we didn't have the information. Today, the administration is building apps. You can see this little website, simplereport.gov. Any school, including UVA, can keep a list of all their employees and students, track their testing over time, and automatically connect with the CDC for real-time feedback. All of that's possible today because of a thin little application that's now free and open source that didn't exist before the pandemic. Or pulling in all the data to include race and ethnicity, which is missing on most of the forms, being able to integrate all that data through a program called ReportStream, also free and open source. So we're building back better. In Washington State right now, they're experimenting with a service Instead of people having to go shop for vaccines from the state government or the pharmacies or the local health systems, you can actually pull all of that information into one clear, user-friendly portal and not have to hit refresh on 10 different sites to get your family vaccinated. So we've got to do better. And that's all possible through open platforms and open innovation. Now, we're going to find a lot of inequities in our society. President Biden directed almost on day one a sort of an executive order on measuring and understanding the equity challenge for the country. One of the things he dispatched was a data working group to really explore all government programs and anywhere we have access to information to cut that information by race and ethnicity and other veteran status and the like. What you'll find is, and unfortunately this is the case in healthcare, the more economically distressed the zip code or the census tract in which you live, the less likely you're going to access your free Medicare annual wellness visit or your free transitional care management visit. You're more likely to go to the ER for reasons that could have been treated safely in a clinic setting. On almost every indicator of inefficient healthcare delivery, simply living in a more economically distressed neighborhood means you're going to be on the worst end of it, regardless of any other variable. We're moving the country to value-based care, which is we're going to give doctors and health networks the capacity to solve this problem by engaging folks more proactively. The problem is the more economically distressed the neighborhood, the less likely you'll even have an option to enroll in one of these accountable care networks. So we have work to do. And to kind of lift up for a moment globally, in my humble opinion, we dominated the 20th century as Americans. And it's an open question as to whether we're going to dominate the industries of the future vis-a-vis China. We are constrained in our national capacity to invest in R&D for the jobs and industries of the future, in large part because of the healthcare tax. If you took away the premium the US pays on healthcare over and above the rest of the industrialized world, and we improved outcomes to meet best practice, we would free up trillions of dollars of economic value that could be reinvested in American competitiveness. Now, either we're going to solve this healthcare conundrum with a big hatchet, and we're going to go to the UVA Medical Center and say, hey, folks, you got by on $1 a year of federal funding. Guess what? Figure out how to do it on 60 cents on the dollar. We could just take a hatchet to the budget and just cut everybody off. I don't think that's going to lead to better healthcare. Or we kind of design the system to better reallocate the dollars to where they're highest and best use. For example, before I left the administration, we put out a $1 billion innovation challenge and said, hey, out of curiosity, what are the ideas that the American people could rally behind that we know have a positive return on investment? We put up this $1 billion challenge, and the very first graduate of the program was the YMCA, a program called the Diabetes Prevention Initiative, DPP. If you are pre-diabetic and you enroll in this coaching program and you take classes for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, more often than not, you're going to lose weight, eat healthier, stay fit, and not get diabetes. The actuary of the Medicare and Medicaid program said unequivocally, this program works. For every person that is qualified for the program that enrolls in it, we get a $4 of savings against the $600 or $700 coupon we have to pay for to get them in the YMCA model. As of May of 2018, thanks to the evidence generated by the trial we ran, every single doctor in the United States of America can prescribe this $700 coupon to every Medicare patient with no copays and deductibles. Here's the bad news. And I called this slide a sobering dose of reality. Despite all the evidence, despite all the financial opportunity, this has been around now for well over 2 years. Hundreds of thousands of people were supposed to benefit from this program. And yet by the end of 2019, a whopping 1,000 people signed up. That's an indictment on us. We don't need Congress to change the law. We need to route seniors who are pre-diabetic to the Y to get the service. This should not be hard. This does not need another multi-billion-dollar, stimulus bill, right? This is on us. We can do better. We have to do better. And in my opinion, we're entering a moment where we will be seeing this happen in healthcare as just one model of public-private collaboration. I call this the consumer-first value-based care era. We are moving away from a passive Medicare benefit where the fight was, do you get access to health insurance or not, towards a more active quarterback who's going to guide you and your loved ones through the healthcare system to find that opportunity to take advantage of the YMCA, et cetera. So as of April 5 actually, a new crop of Medicare direct contracting entities, Village MD is one of the more famous ones. They went online and said, hey, if you live in our neighborhood, pick us to be your preferred quarterback. It doesn't cost you anything. We're not going to take you out of your Medicare benefit. You keep everything you had the way the government built it in 1965. But we're going to be responsible for your care and we'll be sharing in the savings. If we make the collective budget of all the folks we quarterback less than what CMS would have expected to spend, we get to keep 100% of the savings. And part of that gets back into the consumers through the form of added benefits like vouchers to get taxi service to the doctor or discounts on fresh food at the local Walmart. We can organize a new system of care. And I refer to this era as the era of health information fiduciaries. Just like we've had a 401k broker guide us through our retirement and we can do better there, we have the opportunity to create more trust. And so I'll leave you with this general sentiment. As you think about what role you want to play, if you want to join the government or you want to work in the private sector, collaborating with the government to solve problems, or a nonprofit, wear whatever hat you want. To be a leader in this era, we focus on trust. We focus on data and technology to help uncover all the inefficiencies that we know exist and the inequities to close them. It's in our hands to connect the dots between that entrepreneurial spirit that we see in proverbial Silicon Valley and applying it to problem solving. If you think about it today, there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and privacy, and I'd be happy to talk about those issues during the Q&A. In my view, the single biggest opportunity right now is to think about all of the human capital solving. Where are the highest concentration of artificial intelligence engineers? What problem has the highest concentration of that talent pool today? The answer, photos. Photos. So we delight in our various devices. When we take pictures, automagically our computers start labeling them. Oh, is this your wife and your kids? And here are all the pictures of your wife and kids. And you're on vacation. It looks like you're at this location. You go there every few years. Maybe I can bring all the photos from that together in an album. We are delighted in this experience where the photos are being organized and cataloged automatically. Now, just imagine if we could get people who are on the unemployment lines to find out what courses they should take to get skills that are in demand so they can come back stronger from whatever the challenges are in the economy. What if the photo analogy is a Match.com on talent or healthcare or access to financial services? So we've got to find a way to bring that talent pool on the problems that need their attention the most. And so with that, I'll defer to you, Stephen, on whether we have a bit of an open mic night or questions in the chat, whatever makes sense. But I'm eager to be as helpful as I can and to have the conversation on issues that might be of interest to anyone on this call.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aneesh. Very informative. Any questions from the group? You can either raise your hand, put it in the chat, just come off mute and ask the question. I guess I'll, whoops, oh, there we go. I guess I'll start just kind of where you ended on, you know, that healthcare quarterback, for lack of a better term. You know, many of those people aren't necessarily on the internet and, you know, and searching or finding those resources, you know, the high tech way. What is the best way to get at the people with the most need, who are traditionally, you know, maybe have a cell phone or something?
You know, this is one of the areas where we need a lot of creativity. So no, you don't have to wear a superhero cape on the back to be technically savvy to leverage all these things. There was an experiment run with H&R Block, Stephen, where when you file for your taxes and you have kids that are going to college, a lot of that information is needed to complete the FAFSA. But with the friction in the system, too few Americans complete the FAFSA and therefore don't go to college and therefore don't have this opportunity. And it's literally a ridiculous information problem. So the experiment run at H&R Block was, could we pay the H&R Block staff a bonus of $25? I don't remember the number, but let's call it that for the sake of discussion. And ask them to complete the FAFSA, not just here's the empty form, family, go, good luck, but actually do the work and submit it. The study that came out showed that when they did it, when they played that role, 8% more people not only applied, got the student loans, enrolled in school, actually graduated. So they followed a cohort of people and said, all else being equal, if the H&R Block person did the work, 8% more people finished the degree. That doesn't mean I had to learn all the fancy arcana of accessing the IRS data assets. It meant opening up the data to someone I trust. So to me, Walmart might be the most appropriate voice to help navigate this for me. My local primary care doctor, UVA might put an office to assist health center patients who come to the ER that lack access to a great quarterback, if you will, to do a match.com. I'm hopeful the technology is invisible, and what we have is a competitive marketplace, nonprofit, public, private, you name it, competing to earn your trust to help you use this information to navigate better. Right now, how many people can access the UVA medical record? You got to be a doctor at UVA. You got to go to the patient portal yourself. But I can't deputize a startup in Charlottesville to act on my behalf, akin to the H&R Block, to tell me, or my grandma, you qualify for X, tell us if you need help enrolling. And that's the era. That's what I envision happening. It's going to be a competitive marketplace for trust.
Well, as someone with 2 kids in college, having done the FAFSA myself, I certainly can appreciate wanting someone else to do it. All right, Professor Molden has his hand up.
Hi, thanks so much. Really appreciate hearing about these ideas. I was drawn to the example about diapers and nuclear waste. I always thought those two were connected. I didn't know how intimately they were connected. But when I think about these sorts of matches, my guess is we've barely tapped into a tiny, tiny fraction of anything we could do in this space. The problems I'm confronting, yeah, someone has expertise somewhere. I just have no idea. And so can you tell me a little bit more about what individuals could do or nonprofits could do to help facilitate these matches? And then when we think about, we found a match, it's often not in the incentives of both sides to do anything about it. So I'd love to hear more on that front too.
Yeah, first thing we did was we said, let's blow up procurement, which is generally evil. And think about how much money the government spends to solve problems, and we do it very inefficiently. And most people who get these contracts, even for nonprofit services, Their expertise is in getting the grant, not in actually implementing and executing a plan. So you've got this like super weird part of the economy that's distorted. So we, in the America Competes Act, changed the law on procurement to allow for anything under the $50 million mark to be done through a platform we called challenge.gov, where an agency can post a problem, disseminate the ideas widely, and facilitate match. One small example, I was going to share this slide, but I didn't have it in time for this discussion, but the DoD is looking to reduce the time it takes to manufacture vehicles, let's say. It's like takes forever. So DARPA, the R&D function, said, how are we going to tackle this problem? One of the problems is, how do we get from design to prototype? Can we tackle that part of the problem? DARPA's good at finding these sort of micro problems. So we decided to do something crazy. We said, okay, let's do a 3-week challenge.gov competition to anybody in the country who can design a medevac vehicle capable of taking 2 injured soldiers from the battlefield. And the DoD laughed. It takes us 3 weeks to add a comma to an RFP, okay? But we did it. And a waiter at Sizzler, who was dreaming of, going to school and getting a job as a designer, but didn't have health insurance for his wife who was pregnant, was like motivated, saw his heart and soul out for 3 weeks, won the competition, and within 6 months, a prototype was built. And one of my best days was that team drove the prototype from Arizona to Pittsburgh for President Obama to sort of celebrate them and to give them a bit of attaboy. So on the one hand, you need a little bit more of a forcing function on match.com, which we called challenge.gov. You also have laws, Open Government Data Act, bipartisan. Every federal agency is supposed to inventory the equivalent of the nuclear bomb software thing and open it, okay? So we gotta put political pressure for each agency to know what you built for purpose A can be repurposed for the public, and that should be part of the design principle, is build for reuse, not for primary use. And then the third is, I do think the incentives matter. We got to have economists weighing in on what is the right incentive to get people connected to the healthcare.gov tax credits so that they get access to insurance. Right now, we have legacy insurance brokers who get paid something. That was maybe overpaying for a channel that doesn't work. What should the new channel be? And so we have a lot of opportunity for economists to sort of think about micro tweaks to the marketplace to drive better outcomes when it comes to student loans, access to healthcare, earned income tax credits, other access to banking. There are a lot of programs to make your life better in the social safety net, and really very little incentive to drive the outcomes we want in terms of getting people, lifted up out of their lot in life.
All right, looks like one of our students has a question.
Hi, Aneesh. Thanks so much for talking to our cohort. And I had one question. Currently, I'm doing some work with the SBIR STTR team at the US SBA. And one of the challenges that we're looking at is, the resources and access to capital for entrepreneurs, and especially with the economic impacts of COVID-19, they're making this inequality of access to funding exacerbated. So just based on your experiences, working with the Office of Science and Technology Policy team and other works with Startup America, how do we ensure that access to resources and capital are available to all American entrepreneurs?
Yeah, you're onto a really important subject. I would say I come at this from a broader lens, which is, how do we get more companies started? If you think big picture, all of the net new jobs in our economy come from businesses under the 5-year-old mark. And we don't have a lot of data on that cohort. We have small business, we have mature business, but we don't really have new business as a research function to understand who are they, what are their needs, where do they work, et cetera. And what you find is oftentimes clustering of new businesses that succeed has more to do with the change in market incentives than necessarily access to capital in a uniform way. So just to give you a little example of this, if we got ahead of it, in healthcare, we're changing the rules to pay for outcomes from fee for service. It's sort of a big thing. I'm in Arlington, Virginia today. That's where I live. Down the street in Ballston, a company just filed to go public, multi-billion-dollar IPO expectations, called Privia. Next door to Privia is a company that did go public called Evolent, multi-billion-dollar company. Up the way is a company called Aledade. All of these companies thrived in the new business category because they were earlier than the incumbents to see this future and to build for it. Now, how many of those lacked access to capital? Open question. Because of the market incentives, investors opened up their wallets because they made the bet a hungry startup is going to race to the future faster than a lagging incumbent that's just slow to roll. And so what you want to do is do a better job of communicating where the market incentives and the shifts are going and to really spur, like Virginia should be home to more startups that can solve higher education, health, financial services, all of these areas. We're shifting the incentives and we should do a better job of communicating. I've always wanted the SBIR program to really link up to the business needs in the economy. What are the sectors that lacked productivity gains? Government operations itself. I think I saw Andreas on this call. Andreas is a city councilman in Richmond and an entrepreneur himself. Man, we've had zero productivity growth in government operations. We don't even measure government productivity. Where's Dean Solomon? Who's measuring government productivity? You can't, where are the startups competing to make it easier to apply for this or to report a pothole or to get the kid, look at the crisis of getting kids into school 5 days a week. Literally, we need startups to help close these gaps because our institutions aren't getting there. So I'm glad you're advising the SBIR on ways to get more capital to more people. But right now, we are leaving so much room on the table by not educating society about why the incentives have shifted. We should be on a national road tour to say, here's how we get, Virginia is the first in the country to launch this skills-based higher ed program, where if you go to school, get a credential, and get a job, the institution gets a separate grant as opposed to tuition subsidy. We should be the place that startups thrive, getting people connected to that kind of outcomes-based higher ed payment system. What are the opportunities? Where are the startups? What do they need? What are the gaps? SBIR could focus on these 4 or 5 sectors and really unlock it. And we tried to do that with Startup America. We have a lot more work to do.
Professor Shimshak.
Hi, thank you for being here. Before I ask my question, I'll just say who's measuring government productivity, at least on one dimension. Craig Bolden and his colleagues at the Center for Effective Lawmaking are measuring government productivity.
Send me any links in the chat. I would love to chat with them because in the published literature, official government statistics stopped at 1995 on measuring productivity in government. It's one of my biggest frustrations.
Yeah, this is one dimension, but I'll leave it to Craig to communicate what they're up to. It's extremely exciting. I think you would find it quite compelling. My question was alluded to a comment you made, but if the goal is to deputize third parties in an open competitive framework around issues that require extensive personal health, financial information, and other types of very sensitive personal information, can you talk a little bit more about privacy and data security?
Yeah, this is one of the most fascinating misnomers in our policy debate today. We have several laws on the book. And by the way, as bias, President Obama called for a digital privacy bill of rights, and that was my responsibility, and I failed miserably. So let's start with a big black eye on my face, failure, okay? I had lots of failures. This is one of those. So the theory is the following, and I have my frame here is opening up while locking down. First and foremost, today's privacy regime is largely paternalistic. If I happen to have data on you and I'm regulated as a bank, a utility company, a school, or a hospital, that data is regulated. Your Facebook account, lightly regulated. Your student records at UVA, regulated. So the paternalism here is we've got to impose IT burden on UVA to make sure there's a security moat around your data and it doesn't artificially leak on the internet, or more likely, UVA should not be selling my student records to third parties without my permission, right? There's a little bit of a big paternalistic here, which is like somebody else has got my data. How do we constrain their role as an actor in the stage? If you go to the bedrock of every law on the books that created these regulations, they start with the premise that the consumer, the individual, has a right to their data. It's been a bedrock principle of HIPAA. It's a bedrock principle of COPPA, bedrock principle of Dodd-Frank more recently in banking. And when you go to these statutes, they leave open the question of how. So if I said today to my bank, I want the right to access my checking account via any app I choose, in the digital era would be the analogy. How should that work? Should my local Capital One bank tell me, you may exercise this right, but I've only cut a deal with company X, Y, and Z in fintech, and only they get access because they're paying me a kickback or something? Or is there an open marketplace where you cannot block competition? Privacy to me is empowerment. It starts with my ability to access my data and to reuse it however I wish. And we've got to have technical standards to do that. And I spend a lot of my time on the technical standards for individual access to sensitive data. We did quite well in healthcare, so that's now a bedrock law, and it went live early April. So you're going to see the benefits of that, a marketplace of apps competing to help you make sense of your own health data. We've failed miserably in schools. All you school people dropped the ball completely. Zero technical work has been done. Arnie Duncan and I launched the My Data Initiative back in 2011, nothing. And then banks, fascinatingly, the banks self-regulated. Dodd-Frank said you got to be able to allow, if I'm using mint.com, I want to be able to access my data so I can keep track of my balance sheet. They all self-agreed without any other rules. So opening up is the first principle before you lock down. So opening up means you've got to enable trusted access. Now, on the locking down part, this is the key issue. We today lack a baseline privacy principle that if you're working with me, the context matters. If you're accessing my data or building data sets for me because I've hired you to do a job, you can't then reuse my data for something totally unrelated. So we wanted to constrain in the President's Digital Privacy Bill of Rights that when you access data, it's in context. So Cambridge Analytica, I didn't agree and consent that my data would be used to fund political ads that are going to target me for whatever. I was playing a game, a psychometric game. So this concept is going to be a debate, I think, over the next 3 to 5 years, which is how do we put rules of the road on the digital economy that doesn't hinder innovation, but gives us more protection. It's got to be respect for context as the bedrock. Then if you want to, we can debate, is it opt-in, opt-out, et cetera, but at least I have a sense for you're using it for that purpose. Security is a different matter altogether. There we've had a technical gap. The military referred to this as asymmetrical warfare. The attackers only have to write 100 lines of code and they can come at you a billion ways from Sunday. For defenders, we have to protect against every possible permutation of an attack vector. So the moat we're building around our data assets, we can never build a big enough moat to protect against every potential vector of attack. So we've got to shift the technical narrative away from blocking bad actors to mitigating the damage, assuming they're all going to get in. And that's a technical change, and the societal investments are all about how do we move towards more moving target defense. And there's a lot more technical work to be done to make sure. But again, back to boot-based principles, the vast majority of data breaches are not because some sophisticated hacker did some unique thing. It's some moron forgot to update the passwords and someone, gave up their codes. And so they just left a door open for someone to walk right in and use. Didn't require fancy anything. And so we have a lot of culture change around how do we access data sets. I don't know if that answered your question, but it's a litany of give me my data, constrain your own use, and then figure out a way to get the security upgrade so we can shift mitigate the harm versus block the access.
Ethan?
Yeah, so kind of going off that, do you think that what the EU is doing as far as the GDPR stuff is a step in the right direction in that sense? Or when the US comes to doing it, they need to do something else? Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay.
I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to these things. Europe is looking at the broader economy and saying, where's our role in the digital age? We don't have Google. We don't have Facebook. We don't have Twitter. All of the industries of the future left us. So a lot of what you see in Europe really is masked in good language. We want to have a privacy bill. Of course, we want a privacy bill. President Obama wanted a privacy bill, but they did something worse where they basically said, you sort of have to do privacy and you don't really know if you've met the bar. So we're going to litigate this thing for years. And so every US tech company has just basically had to budget for waste of like litigation risk that's not tied to harm. And so our challenge is, how do we build a privacy regime that's got more of an agile framework so that the government isn't having to hard code into legislation, an approach that in a year is no longer relevant. And so that our philosophy was push industry consensus to define, terms of conduct and behavior, and then enforce against their adherence to the industry consensus. And that became more of a juiced up Federal Trade Commission idea. At least that was our opinion in 2012. I still hold that opinion, which is, I appreciate the headlines of GDPR, but the litigation issue is a more of a tax. It's a blunt instrument that's going to constrain the innovation economy. We'll see how Virginia does it, right? We're the second state to pass a law that's in the spirit of a privacy bill. And maybe we could do a better job on our end. I don't know exactly how we're going to be, states alone can't solve this, but many states could come together and then reach industry consensus. So we'll see how the next few years play out with the FTC enforcement, the state AG things against Google and Facebook and Amazon. So let's just sort of see how the dust settles.
I'll ask one more. Lots of obviously talk these days about an infrastructure bill, and I think most people would agree that high-speed internet access for all would probably fall under infrastructure. What are some of the other technology innovations or ideas that you think Americans might accept as quote unquote infrastructure?
Yeah, so we in the sort of Obama strategy for American innovation, we broadened the definition of infrastructure to include the following: a digital grid for the energy sector, a digital healthcare platform for the healthcare sector, R&D investments, so plussing up the budgets of NSF. The goal was, the collective goal is the private sector plus the public sector should equal 3% of GDP investing in research. I think we're at like 2.1% right now, and we're under investing in the public side of that ledger relative to history. And then I do think, and this is an open question as to, flavor of the month, and of course we keep broadband in there. I would say STEM education is probably one of those stretch goals where having the talent in our society capable of filling these jobs in industries of the future feels like infrastructure. That feels like education could be a government, it's a service, but it feels like infrastructure. And, so that together, we call that the building blocks of an innovation economy. My sense on broadband, just to kind of finish the statement there, subsidizing broken models is where we've largely spent the last few decades. I'm not convinced that's the answer. I tried very hard, sort of successful-ish, to shift the paradigm towards lowering the cost of last mile broadband infrastructure development. And we have a uniquely American problem in that if you go to Charlottesville and you go 10 miles west, there'll be a tower for AT&T, a radio infrastructure for Verizon, one for T-Mobile, completely duplicative on a very small base of people who live in access driving that tower. It makes no sense that in today's software eats the world that we shouldn't have one shared hardware and software to say, this traffic is AT&T's, let's process it, this is Verizon's. And so that would save 40 to 50% of the capital cost to deploy broadband networks. And it's just the uniqueness of our American competitiveness that we don't want to have shared hardware and instead have duplicative hardware with subsidies. And I remain angry about that, and I hope we can fix it. But maybe we'll see in this new bill we can get there.
Okay, great. Maybe one or two more. Sarah, you've got your hand up now.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm just curious to hear. Thank you so much for presenting. This is very empowering. What would you say? Oh, how can I phrase this? You talked about what's the American competitive, I can't say the word, but you get it, about what's at stake. What's the robustness of what the government is doing and should be doing? And you talked about the goal, the context, and the call to action. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Senator Warner, who's my mentor, were on this webinar, I think he'd be pulling his hair out, right? Which is, if you think about what China is doing, it is laying the rails around the world to be the digital infrastructure for Africa, the digital infrastructure for, you name it. And we're here playing tiddlywinks, literally. And so if you're going to have two internets, sort of the American open internet-ish and the Chinese controlled internet, who's going to win over the next 50 years? And I'm freaked out that the Chinese closed internet is going to just virtually show up because they've subsidized the rest of the world's infrastructure. And then you ask the question, well, what are the skills and techniques? Well, first generation was, building broadband services. Second generation was building applications on broadband. We're now getting into artificial intelligence, machine learning, and a whole new wave of computing innovation that will fuel products and services we don't even think we needed. Where are we on the race to build those future Facebooks and Googles? Okay, it's like China's like 10 to 50x more capital investment than the US. And sure, we have great companies. We have all these wonderful companies. Google can do its part too, but this is a nation state level battle. And so then the question is, why is Congress not funding these things? Well, we have a budget problem. Why do we have a budget problem? Well, our healthcare thing is crazy and it continues to thrive. So if you removed the healthcare tax, Congress would absolutely fund all of this. And so that's the challenge as I see it. It's like we are really, our failure to get our hands around the healthcare cost inflation issue and quality is directly hitting our competitiveness. That's a Debbie Downer, Steve. We can't end on that. That's sad. We gotta have an upper. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing us down. Can we have an upper or a happy topic?
Alta says, can I ask a quick question? I was just curious, a lot of our students are still in the job hunt, and you have obviously very successfully managed to navigate between the public and private sectors. And I just thought maybe you could close with some lessons learned in your own interesting career path.
I will tell you, and I will say this for the proverbial Wayne Gretzky's on this webinar, going to where the puck is heading. Here's my general view of life. I would take a UVA intern every year when I was in Virginia state government. one of the UVA interns, and generally speaking, they do a job, right? You hired, you do a job, you do homework, research, whatever. But I often found interns who said, you know what, I can also stretch myself to do something that I'm uniquely positioned to do that maybe the rest of the staff isn't focusing on. I'll do more. I'll just tell you one little anecdote. My Governor Kane wanted to do something to democratize, feedback from the American people. And it was around the time that, Starbucks had launched this website. If you have ideas on how to make Starbucks better, go to ideas.starbucks.com and we'll hear you and we'll make differences, whatever. It was kind of cute. You get an idea like this, like, yeah, how are we going to execute on this? We have no resources. I have no budget. So my UVA College of Engineering intern built ideas.virginia.gov over the summer. Governor Kane launched it. He was like the hero that, was it the fanciest thing? No, but it worked. Fast forward to 2021, 2 weeks ago, he just raised $25 million on a $100 million company to build this new healthcare data platform. My intern. What I'm saying is, every one of you, when you go to your next job, you have a day job, but try to find the stress at the boss's, what is the mission objective of the organization you've joined? How might your understanding of technology, data, and innovation in the context of problem solving, this public-private partnership issue, how might your Batten training give you a window as to this sort of seam here that's missing? Is your organization maximizing the value of open innovation, open platforms? I don't mean to push you down a tech rabbit hole, but it is the area that you can leverage as a younger problem solver to kind of get in there with more knowledge than the average person on staff. So I would try to aim for, stretching your time to do the job you've been given well, but to lead with this. And we all have it in us. I would love, by the way, I'm hiring. So if any of you are looking for a job in healthcare data, please email me, whatever. I would love graduates to come in. My point is this, thinking about problem solving in a new way. Nonprofits, governments themselves, and for-profits all have a role to play, and rarely is there a person accountable to maximize the value. So you could really push way beyond your pay grade at whatever entry-level role you may have coming in.
Well, that is a very positive way to end this program. And I know Steve joins me in thanking you, and as does the rest of our community, and sharing your valuable time with us today. We, as Betty said, very well done and informative. It was really inspiring. And if we could all sort of subscribe to your belief in data, I know we'd be a lot better, and convince our local leaders to do the same. I know we'd be in a lot better position. So keep up your good fight and your good work, and we'll all stay in touch. Thank you so much. And everyone else,
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Anish.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.